more important than talent, than skill, than looks, than money, than literally anything, is the ability to show up day after day, to keep going even when you really don't want to put in the work even when you least feel like it. Or in other words, to be consistent. Because the thing is, consistency over the long term is everything. But the main problem is, of course, how do we stay consistent? How do we keep going when we just also really don't feel like it at all? When the brain starts to make up all these excuses for why it's just not worth it, or why it's just so much easier to skip today. Let's start tomorrow. Let's pick it back up again tomorrow. Like, how can we change that? How can we make it for ourselves easier to stay consistent? That's something I've been loving to research, and I'm really excited about this episode because I want to share with you the 5 main learnings that I feel like have made a huge difference for myself and that are just so crazy powerful and really showing up as the version that we want to be, and especially in these moments when we do not feel like it at all. And I would say, let's dive right into it with learning number 1, which is kind of the fundamental, and it's to understand how our brain works. I really believe this is absolutely key to be consistent, because the first thing to understand is that our brain is wired for comfort, right? It is programmed to keep us safe and cozy and comfortable, and that is why it actually really feels so horrible to ourselves to do things that are outside of our comfort zone, right? And that challenge us and just make us not feel within that cozy comfort spot, because it's literally what our brain is made to do. It wants to protect us from any danger, from any also unknown things, so any unfamiliar situations. And I think really understanding that it's completely normal that these thoughts come up in our mind that try to persuade us to stop doing the thing or to skip a day or to start tomorrow, that is completely normal. Everyone has that, but that, of course, we want to figure out what we can do about this, which brings us to the second point about the brain. And this was really life-changing for me to learn. I learned it from the Huberman Lab podcast. Basically, the thing is that we have this area in our brain called the anterior midcingulate cortex. And that area is kind of like directly linked to our willpower. So the stronger that area is, the more willpower we have, the easier it is for us to do hard things. And the way that we strengthen that area is to do hard things. So the more difficult, challenging things that we really do not want to do, the more we do of them, the more we kind of strengthen that muscle, and then the easier it gets to do these things. And I think that's just super important to know, because what that basically means is that consistency does get easier. It does get easier over time, because the more we do it, the easier it will get, because the more willpower we will have to really follow through. And that literally also just means that the most important part of sticking to a routine or a habit or a goal is the beginning. And it is exactly kind of like that point where we feel like giving up, where the motivation is starting to leave us, and where it would just be so much more comfortable and easy to skip it and to stop. That is exactly the crucial point where we need to push ourselves and kind of really force ourselves to keep going, because then from there it will get easier. And it's really important to understand that this area will only get stronger by things that are truly uncomfortable. Because, for example, if you really enjoy going to the gym and you enjoy nothing more than feeling your muscles burn or whatever, then it won't strengthen that area. It has to be something that you really do not like to do. Super important is to also know that the exact opposite is also happening. So if we only do things that we enjoy, that are fun, that are super short-term gratification, dopamine, that those weaken our anterior midcingulate cortex. So they have the exact opposite effect and make it weaker and weaker, why it then gets even harder to do the hard things. So challenge for you and me is to find something every single day that you just really do not want to do, something that really sucks, but you still do it and you find that. And the more it sucks, actually, the better. So trying to really think of something you hate so much and following through with it and just reminding yourself of how much stronger it makes that area in your brain, which is going to have the most amazing effect long term on everything else. Learning number 2 is something we've already discussed on this podcast before, but I think it's really worth mentioning again. And I really also need to tell this to myself and internalize this so much more. So I tell you, this episode is as much for you as it is for me, because these are just really so important things. Because our environment is really everything. And I think it's crazy how much I think we still underestimate that, and how we are still not fully aware of just how crazy much our environment impacts us in every single aspect of our life. And that the main question we should be asking ourselves is, how can we design our environments in a way that really helps us to reach our full potential? And the most important ways for me personally are, number 1, to keep my environment as clean and organized as possible, because a cluttered environment and a chaotic environment just really also creates a chaotic mind. It directly translates onto our thoughts and our behavior, that it's just so much harder also to focus, right? And to concentrate on things. And directly connected to that is also something that James Clear talks about in the book Atomic Habits, is to design especially your home, but in general your environment, in a way that it's super conducive to stick to your good habits, so that we don't put the sugary drinks or sweets or unhealthy food directly in front of our nose in the kitchen, but that we either eliminate those things or hide them and really put all the healthy options visible. That we put our book on our bedside table, so it's right there, that we put our phone outside of the bedroom, that we put our workout clothes on the chair for the next day, and all these small things we can do to make it just much easier for ourselves. We want to make it as easy as possible to follow through. And just as important as our home and our surrounding is, of course, also the people we surround ourselves with. We are the 5 people we surround ourselves most, because we just, I think, especially unconsciously take in everything that's going on around us, and especially behavior of other people, what they say to us, how they act. We automatically just internalize that so much. And therefore, we really want to ask ourselves, do we want to become like the people we spend most time with currently? Do we aspire to be like them? And is being around them kind of really helping me become the version I want to be of myself? And it is just super difficult, right? Because oftentimes we don't have that much control over. But especially if you're maybe struggling with finding people around you that you feel like really elevate you or inspire you, or have behaviors and traits about themselves that you really admire, my number 1 tip is just always to find those people online, and then just trying to consume as much of their content or their books or podcasts or whichever way they share their life or knowledge, to just really try to make that a huge part of your life, to take in that information through them and create that environment for yourself. Because again, I think we want to find these people around us for who it's normal also to do the things we want to do. Because I think it's so crazy how, let's say, for example, in terms of health, how much it can influence us to be around people who are just not healthy, because it just makes us think that it's normal, right? Makes us think it's normal to not work out that much, or to eat junk food, or to just enjoy as much as possible. Instead of, for example, surrounding ourselves with people who are working out every day, and it's normal for them to do that. It's kind of like a complete non-negotiable. It's normal for them to take the best care of themselves that they possibly can, to eat healthy, to buy ecological food, to cut out sugar, to just do all these things. And if it's something that is so normalized, it automatically translates completely onto ourselves. So really never, ever underestimate that. And then the last point is to also, of course, be extremely mindful about what it is that we consume. And I've also talked about that many times before. But again, I think it's a good reminder to make sure, who are you following on social media? What are you watching on TV? I actually have to say, it's been so crazy to me, because I just recently read the book The Housemaid, which it is an amazing book. It was so, so good. I was so hooked that I had to read it and I had to know what the storyline is. But before I started reading, I actually asked ChatGPT, do you think it's a good idea for me to read it? Because I'm super sensitive to scary stuff. And ChatGPT literally told me, yeah, you might maybe be careful with this one because it is quite an intense and scary book. But I had just heard so many times now how amazing it is. So I was like, oh no, I have to read it. And I started and I just had no choice. I had to finish it. So especially if you are into more like these thriller, drama kinds of books, definitely huge recommendation. You're gonna love it. But I read it and I had nightmares afterwards. I just was so scared at night and so uncomfortable. And there was especially one night where my husband wasn't there. And oh my God, I regretted that I read that book so much. And that's just insane, right? And such a good example of how much it impacts us, because I think, again, we completely underestimate it. We really do. We think, oh, it's fine, it doesn't matter, but it actually really does. And was just such an important reminder for myself to be more strict with myself there and more careful with the things that I allow into my mind. Coming to learning number 3, which out of these 5, I would say is really the most powerful one, is progress and habit tracking. Let's start with progress tracking. And what it means is to create a way of tracking the progress you make in the most visible or most measurable way you can. So for example, if your goal is to lose weight or to become more flexible, I think one of the best ways is to take pictures. So taking pictures of your starting point and then throughout your journey so that you're really able to see a difference. And to me, that was by far really one of the most powerful ways to stay consistent, especially with my yoga and flexibility practice, is to take these pictures. And then it was mind-blowing to me to see the difference and to see the progress, because once you're in it, you don't notice how much progress you make, right? Because it happens so gradually. But if you see kind of day one compared to where you're at some point, and you see that like next to each other, it's the best feeling in the world, in my opinion. To just see how much progress you have made, and all of a sudden for me, like what my body was able to do, something that it wasn't able to do before, like that is so crazy and so motivating that it really helps to really find that intrinsic motivation to stay consistent. So finding any way that really allows you to track your progress. And then the next thing was the habit tracking, which means to find a way, and my preferred way, and that I also think is the most powerful one, is to have a notebook that you really dedicate to habit tracking. I think I've been also talking about that 2 episodes ago, where I also recommended that YouTube video. I'm also gonna link it for you in the show notes and in the description to this episode, because it's this video where this guy explains exactly how he has this system to track his habits in a journal. And it's just such an amazing practice in so many different ways, because first of all, of course, it gives you just this nice overview of how consistent you actually are. Shows you exactly, have you been sticking to your habit or have you not? There's kind of like no room to make up excuses, and just really visualize it. So you have to be completely honest to yourself. Also, every time that we check off something, it releases dopamine in our brain, which then again also just gives us more motivation and just more drive, kind of like to keep going with that habit. And then it also keeps your goals and your habits right at the forefront of your mind, because it is something you look at every day and you track your habits every day. And so you really have it present, because it's just really also completely normal that during our daily life, it just happens super fast that we forget about, oh yeah, we wanted to meditate every day, or we wanted to take more steps or drink more water or whatever it is. So by also writing it down every day, we keep really fully present and we don't allow ourselves to forget about it or to deprioritize it. Learning number 4 is by far my biggest problem, and that is perfectionism, because perfectionism is literally the biggest threat to staying consistent, because it's kind of this thought pattern that if you cannot do the thing properly, you might just skip it altogether. Like if you cannot do a full workout, then it makes no sense. Then we'll just drop it and maybe continue tomorrow. Or if you've been skipping 2 days in a row, it's all over anyways right now. So we might just give up completely. And just, this mindset that if I can't do it perfect, I will just not do it at all. So I think it's really important to remind ourselves that consistency is not perfectionism. It's not that if I can't do it perfect, I'm not going to do it at all. It's also not intensity, that if I can't do the full workout, I'm not going to do the workout at all. And it also doesn't mean that you're never allowed to miss, because missing is not the problem, but vanishing is, when you just then abandon it completely. So what consistency actually means is to keep promises to yourself more often than you break them, to return quickly after you miss a day, and doing the minimum that you can on low energy days instead of disappearing completely. So remembering that literally anything is always better than nothing. And it's so normal, right, to have these days where your energy is maybe at 30-40%, and then it's not about doing the workout 100%, but it's then also about just doing whatever you can, because it's still so much better than not doing it. And something that's really powerful for me to remember is that it's not just about doing the thing for kind of the sake of doing it, but also to strengthen the neural pathways in our brain. Because we also, of course, need to remember that every time that we skip the workout, every time we tell ourselves, oh, it's fine, I'll just order the junk food, or I'll just eat the sugar, or whatever it is that we promise ourselves not to do, every time we give in and we do it, we also strengthen those neural pathways in our brain, right? And that behavior gets easier and easier. And that's, to me, just so powerful to remember that that's, of course, something I don't want to happen. I don't want my brain to take the easy way out and for it to also learn that that's what we do. I want it to learn to do the thing that I know will help me in the long term, right? And that will help me get to where I want to, and to really strengthen exactly those areas in the brain. We have arrived at the last learning number 5, which is that consistency really becomes almost completely impossible if we do not have a strong why. If we do not have a super clear and strong reason for why we want to achieve the thing that we're working towards, we're going to give up. Because the truth, the very hard truth, just really is that if you do not achieve your goal, and if you do not manage to stay consistent with it, you simply do not want it enough. And I know this is maybe not that black and white always, and maybe not like in 100% cases the truth, but I would definitely argue in like 90% of the time that if you do not want it enough, you're also not going to follow through with it. Coming back to learning number 1, it's so tough for our brain to do things that are uncomfortable. And it's literally programmed against that, right? And to keep us in the familiar and within our comfort. And so we need to be willing to tolerate some sort of pain or sacrifice or whatever to do the hard thing. So we need to be willing to give something in return for it, because we simply cannot expect change if we're not willing to do anything for it, right? Because there's also the saying that nothing worth having comes easy, because if it was easy, then everyone would have it. So we really need to find that super strong why for ourselves. We need to find that reason that makes it worth it and that keeps us going. And for me, what really helps is my future self. So really connecting with that future version of myself and making it such a strong desire in my mind of that is who I want to become, and that's what I want my life to be like. And just always connecting to that. But I actually have many more whys that I try to remind myself of constantly. So it really has to be just as strong as possible. And one of the questions I really love to ask is, if someone would follow you around for a week, what would they think your priorities and goals are? So we want our behavior to reflect exactly what it is that we're working towards, because otherwise we're not really working towards it, right? And then we just cannot expect the outcome that we want. So I just really think it's such a nice, powerful question. And I want to end this episode with a reminder how good it feels to be consistent and to be disciplined, and especially to make progress. What an amazing feeling it is to make progress. It's just so cool to see how much we're able to improve ourselves, and also just how much lies within our power. And there's this whole concept of high agency, which I find really inspiring. And it's this belief that you have full control over the outcome of your life, that it's not decided by someone else, but that it's kind of really within your own power and based on your decisions. Like, all the choices you make directly influence the outcome of your life and what your life looks like. And I think that's just so empowering to remember that we have power and control, and that it also just really doesn't feel good at all to not make progress, to stagnate, or to even regress, right? When you feel like you're getting worse at something, I feel like that's almost the worst feeling in the world, when there's something you were able to do and all of a sudden you're not able to do it anymore because you, for example, stopped practicing it or whatever, and it is actually something that's important to you. Then it's just so annoying and so frustrating. So yeah, reminding yourself, especially in those moments, those annoying tiny moments when you don't want to do it, when you don't feel like it at all, reminding yourself of how amazing you're gonna feel, where you will be in a year from now if you keep going in this very moment. What is the absolute best that you're capable of? I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions or feedback or anything, definitely leave it in the comments. I always love to hear from you, and I can't wait to see you in next week's episode. Bye.